am not a developer. I'm not a real geek. So I'm going to try to make this as understandable as possible for you guys through my own understanding. And what I'm trying to really get at here is why it's important to just kind of understand that this revolution is happening with HTML5 and what that is and what some of the things that it brings us are. So it's been, I was kind of fascinated when I went through this the other day and laying out this slide as to, particularly when things started in 2007, how fast things have progressed with this mobile technology and what we kind of assume we can do. I mean, from 93 to 2006, we were pretty much just working with web pages for everything. You know, there were some smartphones out there that had web browsers, but it was all using HTML. And then when the iPhone came along, I don't know if you guys can remember this, but when the iPhone came along, everyone was, you pulled it out of the box, you started it up, and on the screen were all these little apps, but there wasn't any way to page, because what you got on the iPhone was what you got on the iPhone. There was, Safari was, if you were going to do anything other than those apps that were on the iPhone when you bought it, it was going to be through Safari. And Apple said to all the developers, chagrin at that point in time, you can't develop apps for the iPhone. That's not in the plan. Web apps are where it's at. Web apps, everybody's going to develop web apps. And all the developers went home and said, okay, well, and Apple released all this specification about how to develop a web app, but basically they were saying Safari is the doorway to these mobile devices. And Apple, the apps that are on the iPhone are the apps that you get to use. And then, a year later, Apple suddenly said, well, we're going to actually release a developer's toolkit. We are actually going to. I think they just weren't ready for some of this actually back then. But they were in many ways, and the 2007 thing is kind of visionary, like Apple often is, in that the web apps are really where it's at in many ways. We're all really fixated on apps right now, and we'll talk a lot about that. But the web apps, there's a lot of stuff with the web apps that's still very relevant, and we're kind of coming back to that today, particularly with HTML5. But this was kind of before its time a little bit. Apple's insistence that everything be a web app. So then came the Apple Store and apps, and now, in 2009, pretty much, people are saying if you don't have an app, then it's not, really worthwhile content, and it's not really a good application, because really apps are kind of where it's at. And then, if you haven't seen the Wired cover that says the web is dead, again, this kind of reinforcement that everything is all about apps. Well, I think HTML5 kind of is a game changer a little bit in that. And it's not that HTML5 is going to bring everybody back to 1993 and the web in that way, but it really combines a lot of the stuff that you get with a web app and the stuff that you get with an app, and it blurs it in a way that is going to make it so there are some real benefits, and it's going to be less, no one's even going to be talking about this, I'm thinking, in a little while. I mean, everybody's going to see everything as an app, but a lot of it actually is going to be HTML5 and kind of hidden behind the scenes that way. So this is what we're going to focus on here. Rachel talked about this a little, and I just want to go yesterday. And I just want to go back to it. Is talk a little bit about what it today. And this is kind of a pure description because there's a lot of crossover already in tools that you're using. But a native app is an app that you have to download. It's generally written by a software developer. It has very customized code. It's onboard content. In other words, you can be looking at it on the plane typically without having to have a network connection. It may have a network connection, but just it's an option. They can be sold, and they have access to your hardware, your gyroscope, geolocation, camera, those types of things. A web app generally is going to require a network connection. The content's always up to date because you're getting it off the network. It's really limited to the browser, but it is kind of device independent because, I mean, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people fled to web apps, is because you don't actually have to make a different one for Android and a different one for, or for the Android tablet or for the iPad. That it can be device independent. It doesn't have access to the hardware itself, at least not directly. But then one of the really nice things about web apps that you don't have with native apps is that you can get it from any device. So Larry can give me his iPad, and I can go to a web app on Larry's iPad and log in as myself and use the web app, and it's just like it is where if Larry hands me his iPad, I can't use my app on my iPad. So there are some real pros and cons to both of these. So mixing the two worlds together can have some benefit. So this is the way, again, as a non-developer, the way I look at this. That native apps are really preferred for their distribution and ease of use. And this is a weird thing that's happened now, but this is part of the reason, the distribution part, is right now I think a lot of people are saying, well, we have to have a web app. We have to have a native app because we have to have it in the App Store. And because that's where everybody's finding things. And we have to have an app so our museum's website is sitting on the center of their screen of their iPad, rather than that they have to go to Safari and look up with a bookmark or something like that. Some of the excitement is about the power of the apps themselves, but there's also this whole marketing and distribution model, even though it's more difficult to go through the Apple Store than it is to just put out a website. There is a lot of hype just about that channel as highlighting things and kind of really distilling brand into it versus doing a Google search where everything in the world's there. The web apps are universally accessible. They're easier to develop and maintain. I mean, every time you change the code for a native app, you have to go to your iPad screen, and when the developer makes a change, I mean, I don't know how many times you guys that have iPads or iPhones look at how many updates you have, but the little update thing every day on my iPhone says, I have 5 applications that I need to take time to update again. That's never the case with the web app. Okay, I'm going to give you the. How many of you have created a web app before? Okay. How many of you have iPads in front of you right now? Okay, we're all going to make a web app right now. Okay. I don't think we've done this yet. So go to your favorite museum go open Safari, go to your favorite museum website. I'm not really going to my favorite, I'm just going to one that I can type.
You don't really have favorites, right?
I don't have favorites, no. As a vendor, you can never have favorites. Okay, so, all right, now here's how you make your web app. Go up to the little arrow on the left-hand side of your screen that's pointing toward the URL. And you'll see you got this pop-up menu here. And say add to your home screen. And hit add. Okay. Here's your web app. I mean, in many ways, this is what a web app is. And this is, and a lot of people are fighting to get into the iTunes store just purely to be able to have this icon on your desktop. And ironically, you can't just submit your website and get a lot of people are actually making and I know a lot of developers who have done this for clients, are making basically false front doors for museums' mobile websites that are just purely an icon with a link to the front door of their museum's website, because they know they need to be in the Apple App Store. And it's free, you know, and they'll advertise it as free, and it looks like a good deal, but it's just a web app. So does this make sense to everybody? I mean, there's a lot of hype around apps right now, I guess, is really my point before I go any further. This is also a really useful thing. If you didn't, I don't think anybody showed you guys who are new to iPads how to do this, but it's a really useful thing to be able to just take your the things you use all the time on the web, and instead of making bookmarks in Safari, just make little app icons that you can. So that was kind of a joke, but it's kind of true at the same time. So HTML5, as I said before, is somewhere between a web app and Skype is my example of an app. The other thing, the HTML5 can perform very much like a native app. The other thing that it can do is it can perform, and you hear this discussed a lot, that it can perform and replace a lot like Flash. I'm assuming that most of you know what Flash is, but you know there's a lot of websites out there, the ones that you can't actually view on your website, on your iPad or on your iPhone, that have either the whole site built in Flash or a part. And a lot of them are some of the most interesting things that are out there, unfortunately. They're the things that actually behave like apps. They're the things that have really rich, interactive, multimedia experiences that are not just purely text, images, and video laid out on a screen. And so there's a real desire to not have to have Flash, which is a proprietary tool set, and not super easy to use and expensive to actually just buy the application to build a Flash application. It's a real desire to move away from that model, particularly for Apple, since it's not part of their domain. But I think this is not just about Apple. You hear it equated to Apple a lot, especially because I think they've been pushing in this direction earlier than everybody else, but it's not just about Apple. So this is, I think, as geeky as I'm going to get. And this is really kind of the, actually I think the next slide's more geeky, but this is the definition of what HTML5 is. And it's pretty simple. It's basically HTML like we've been using since 1993, hypertext markup language, which is just text that you can, if you open up an HTML document, you can read it. It's not complete gobbledygook. It's not ones and zeros. And it's for describing contents and appearance of web pages. It's that simple. What HTML5 does is it basically adds more words to the dictionary that you can use within this vocabulary. There's new things that you can do with this, but it's still just really text. So that was the formal definition. This is kind of the street definition of HTML5, because when people talk about HTML5, they're really talking about these three things. They're not really just talking about this, because this in itself doesn't do a whole lot. This in itself sends instructions to the cascading style sheets, which I'll explain in a second, and to JavaScript. And this you often will see right now is called CSS3, which is also kind of like HTML5, and CSS3 is a new version of cascading style sheets that has a lot more functionality than the old version used to have. But what you have when you combine these things, cascading style sheets give you the ability, this is basically, it's HTML5, and I'm going to simplify here a little bit, basically says, here are all the components I want to use. This cascading style sheets, if you think about working in Microsoft Word, or even more appropriately, a page layout program like PageMaker, or, now I'm really dating myself, InDesign, or Quark Express, my favorite program. This is really, the cascading style sheets are really kind of where you can do that level of design. And this world of cascading style sheets has changed a lot. You can all of a sudden do things like put layers of information on top of each other. CSS3 allows you to do things like shadows. And there's even some levels of, when you combine CSS3 with JavaScript, some levels of interactivity you can do with it. But a lot of things that you used to have to do with Flash to get the graphical treatment, or you had to do it as a bitmap, as an image, and actually save it to your site, you can do those things dynamically now. Just through the English language written in the cascading style sheet. This does everything from saying what fonts and how big things are, how they're placed as columns, to what kind of gradient you're putting behind things, and that kind of stuff. The JavaScript, this is where a lot of the real kind of magical, this is one kind of the last revolution that happened, was you heard that, I don't know how many of you know this, the term Ajax, but it was basically when JavaScript took this leap and was able to start doing all sorts of dynamic things with the web pages. One of the things that was the most noticeable was you could actually change page content without the page having to completely disappear and go to another page, which was a huge revolution for people who just wanted to change elements on the page. That all comes down to a combination of cascading style sheets in JavaScript. But this is kind of where the interactivity comes from. This is where the design comes from. And this is where the instructions come from. Okay, that was the geeky part. Does that make sense? Okay. Am I boring you guys? I'm hoping you're not all like, oh, Scott, we all understand that. All right. Now this is the first test of the network. All right. Do you have iPads? All right. Let me get the URL back up on the screen, and you guys can all experience this yourselves, I hope. Can you read that? So you don't need to put the HTTP part. I'll read it to you. iPad.lookbookhd.com/glide.html. That should be it. You should get a page that looks something like this. Is it working?
Can you take the mic off and put it in?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. When you step away, it's hard to hear you.
I should stop wandering around. Oh, did you get the?
Yeah.
And is it loading for anybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. At least for you, it's working. So this is just an example. Now, keep in mind, this is not, for Flash, this would be nothing, or for a native app, this would be nothing. But if you haven't loaded, you should be able to take your fingers and take this and scroll it up. You should be able to take this video, put your fingers in it, pinch it open, and it will fill your whole screen. I don't know how well it's working for you because we have mid. Is it working for anybody? Is anybody getting any of these effects I'm describing?
No.
Okay.
The video.
This is just a demo. But I think it shows a lot of different layered things having to do with none of this is really graphics other than the photographs. All this stuff is stuff that's generated with this cascading style sheets. It's floating, you can move it around, you can scale things. It's not a native iPad app, it's just a simple example of kind of combining some of these elements of HTML5. Okay, I'm gonna move on. So these are the main things when people talk about how cool HTML5 is going to be or already is. And one of the things that's interesting about HTML5 is it's kind of snuck up on us slowly, and there are a lot of elements that we're already using from HTML5. But in some of the web pages that we're used to. But these are the main the main things when people talk about HTML5 and how revolutionary it's going to be. These are the main things that it does. So first of all, you can embed audio in a page without having to have any plugins. So you don't have to have a QuickTime plugin. You don't have to have Flash. You can just put an MP3 file or a WAV file or an OGG file, audio file, in a web page using the audio tag surrounding the file name and some other parameters, and all of a sudden that piece of audio can be embedded. So there's some really great examples of this on the Apple site, and some of you have probably seen these before. But basically, it's just a simple audio player. Embedding video is basically the exact same thing. In fact, they're kind of talked about interchangeably, but because they are different media formats, they should be mentioned separately. But video can also be embedded. This is a really big deal because it used to always be that you had to have Flash or QuickTime to play a video on a web page. No longer. And what this really means, it's not so much about part of it's about this language, but a lot of it is really about the browsers themselves. The browsers are doing all this work for you. They're basically HTML5 compatible browsers. They've kind of standardized parts of the browsers to just say, well, the browser is now just going to play video. You don't have to add something to the browser to play video. And here's the command set you use to tell the browser to play video. All this stuff is really the work of these browsers, the new HTML5 compatible browsers. That's really where the magic is. All this text that we've been talking about with the style sheets in HTML5 is really just telling your browser how to do these things that it was previously not capable of doing. So I'm just gonna describe how this works. And we'll all go ahead and do a hands-on thing at the end here. So this is another demonstration. This actually looks just like how the Apple TV works. You can touch and select these different menu items. There's no Flash, it's all HTML. This spins out to the front with the different movie trailer boxes, and if you touch this dissolves away and a movie plays here. It's all HTML, it's not Flash. It feels very much like an app. And on a decent network, it works just as well as an app. Or if your presenter has a URL that works. Okay, so another thing you can do, and here's a bunch of things, but I'm working on a project with the iPad project with the Art Institute of Chicago right now, and one of the many things we're doing are these, what we used to do in QuickTime VR, which is now, actually that's an interesting thing, is the iPad does not support QuickTime VR. And nor will it ever, because Apple's pushing for doing that type of thing in HTML5. And I can show you later on my iPad how these VR rotations work, but they work wonderfully. In fact, they can do all sorts of cool things you can't do with QuickTime VR. And you can do these kind of object rotations, and you can also do the environmental virtual reality, where you're actually looking around a space, at the ceiling, on the floor, that type of thing. No QuickTime required.
Is it an MP4 file? What's the medium?
It's all it's all dynamic stitching of the images that's done by you're actually just uploading a set of images and giving giving an array of what the file names are, and it will go through and throw them together. That's easier than QuickTime VR. So the next thing I want to talk about we were just talking about the video, is the Canvas tool. And this is probably the tool that I understand the least because it can do the most. The Canvas tool is basically, the definition of it is that it's an area on the screen where you can render graphs, game graphics, visual information on the fly. Well, this is different than just displaying an image. This is basically saying that the browser can all of a sudden start, can define a rectangular area on your screen and can draw, you know, a real-time walk-through environment like a Second Life type of application right within this rectangle, and it's all being done with HTML and Canvas and JavaScript. That you can do this real-time rendering of graphics that can change based on input from the user's mouse or input on the screen, or a lot of the demonstrations that are out there right now are, you know, like particle demonstrations where you touch the screen and something changes based on your interaction and things like that. But again, this is all HTML. This isn't Flash. It's not any. If you open the program, it's all text that you can read. It's all English language. You might not understand how they're using it, but it's not. You know, it's a very different world than it used to be. I'm going to have you guys try this one. Okay, I'm going to read the URL. You ready? This is really cool. This is basically like Photoshop, completely written in HTML5. And you've seen these kind of things before, but they're always done in Flash. So it's www.robodesign, all one word, .or. Yes, thank you. .ro, not .or. /paintweb /trunk /demos /demo1.html. I'm sorry, I would have made it. If I knew I was going to have to do this with you guys, I would have made short URLs. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to first see that image, this image appear on the screen, and then there should be a box down here that says click to edit. And then when you click to edit, it's going to launch the HTML5 interface for going in. And then it's just going to give you, and this is really basic, you know, this is a Canvas demonstration. It shows you some really basic tools. And this isn't like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. But if you think that this is written in HTML5, it's not using Adobe Flash, it's just open source text that's making all this functionality happen. It's pretty cool stuff. Especially because you basically can go in and change this yourselves without having, you know, the Flash, one of the things was you couldn't go take somebody else's Flash program and manipulate it. You can with HTML5 because it's all just written in English. Another thing that's really interesting, and this is one of the things that's a real game changer having to do with the difference between web apps and native apps, is that you can take web applications and make them so they'll work when you're not online, which sounds crazy. But basically you can bookmark, for instance, an application in HTML5 that's been made to work offline. And when you do that, what it does is it downloads what's called a manifest list. But what a manifest list is, like a shipping manifest. It lists all the files that it needs to run. And when you load that file, that's meant to run offline, that manifest list says, okay, the person's looking at this page, download all these things into their local storage, which we'll talk about next, onto their browser. And what that means is, if you have an HTML5 browser and you go to that page again, and you're on the airplane and you're not paying for Wi-Fi, you can then go to your calendar that's in HTML5, and all your events and everything will be there just like it was when you're on the web page. And you can add new events and everything, and it'll work just like it would when you're on the web page. But the minute you go back to online, your browser will say, oh, you're online. And it will be able to interact again. And this is the other part of that. The two kind of work together. They don't have to. And is that HTML5 allows you to have local storage. And what this means is that a website basically can store data on your computer. And some of you might say, well, cookies already did that. But the difference between cookies was that cookies were things that were placed on your computer that were not private. The host could go and look at the cookies. And that's part of the reason why a lot of people either block cookies or delete cookies, is because they're not private. Local storage for HTML5 means there's actually, it's kind of like your own filing system on your computer for files that are used by your browser. So when you're using these online and offline applications, you can have files stored locally on your computer as well. This is going to allow basically you to have things that function just like a native app, that are all written in HTML5 and will work even when you're not on the network. Make sense? Yes?
When you hook back up to the network, it won't relay any information back to the network now?
This local storage will not, unless you're using an app where you've given it permission to do so. Like if you sign up for a personal calendar, where part of the functionality is for you to be able to, from any computer, to go look at that calendar, it would do that. But cookies are not protected at all, and this is very different than that. So we'll look at this again in a minute. This is a version of the calendar, but there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. And then the last thing is geolocation. Now there's still a big boundary between some of the stuff, and part of this is because there's no standardization with devices, with things like cameras, with the different sensors that like the iPhone and the iPad have. But geolocation is something that can be done pretty well now, because it's really not about the device. It's really about the access point that you're using to get on the internet. And HTML5 can understand geolocation. So it can actually tell you, and you've probably even seen this in a couple apps. You've definitely seen it if you've used an iPhone or a iPad, where it says, would you like the app to know your current location, so it can tell you where the restaurants are, or something like that. But now your browser is going to be asking you this question. And your browser, without you having to type in your zip code or anything like that, your browser is going to be able to just know where you are and tell the application. There's a safety built in. It's supposed to always prompt you to, would you like to give, I don't know, Yelp your current location. So let's all look at this demo. I'm going to read the URL to you. It's HTML5demos.com/geo. I think that will do it right there. This is a really simple demonstration, but what it should do is it should bring up a window that says, would you like to share your current location? And then you should be able to say yes. And even though you're not using G3 iPads, it should tell you where you are. Is this working for anybody? I have to be honest, I only tried this on my Safari browser on my computer, but it said it would work on the iPad. How this works is there's a company, I think it's called Sky King, that goes around and basically, kind of like what Google was accused of, these guys are the masters of. They basically go around and they've logged all the Wi-Fi access points, and they know basically all the different access points that people can get on the internet, and they can tell from your computer what access point you're using, and that's how they decide where your geolocation is. So in general, it'll probably be accurate. Yes, this is actually a screenshot off of my computer last night from my hotel rooms. It nailed it. So
if you're using 3G and you're not on the Wi-Fi network, what happens?
If you're using 3G, it's going to actually do it as good, if not better, because it's going to use the Wi-Fi tower triangulation and all that stuff. What has been what's been lacking is this kind of universally available in browsers on all platforms. So here's some places that I would recommend you go. This has the cool, if you haven't looked at these Apple demos, the Safari demos, I think there's 14 of them. A lot of them are kind of mind-blowing as to what they can do with HTML5. Really worth taking a look at. I only showed you a couple of them. There's some really cool, and they keep adding stuff. There's a second page to it. It used to just be one page, now there's 2 pages.
They got a whole HTML5 site too, apple.com/HTML5. There's a bunch of cool stuff there too.
And then there's this HTML5 demo site, which is where the geolocation's from. That's a comprehensive list of all the functions, much more than what I went into, much more detail, all the functions that are added with HTML5 and demonstrations of each one of them. I really like this dive into HTML5 org site. It's an O'Reilly, it's basically a abstract of an O'Reilly book, but it's really, it's part where I extracted some of my presentation from. It's really good resource, really fun to read. I mean, as fun as this kind of stuff gets. Easy to read. And then this OHTML5.com site is a good site that has both demos and videos that demonstrate a lot of things, and text on how they're actually done, which is it's nice to actually, if you're interested in this stuff, to say, well, how exactly did they do that? So that will show you that. So here's the things to consider. First of all, it's not compatible. HTML5 sites are not compatible with older browsers. It's not all or nothing. I don't know what that is. It's not all or, it's or, yeah. It's not all or nothing. Obviously, I did this late last night.
Flash.
So what I mean is by it's not all or nothing is you will find that certain browsers have certain HTML5 features right now, but they don't have all of them. Some of them will be able to do video right now, but won't be able to do all the Canvas stuff. So and so each browser has different limitations. The capabilities and compatibilities of the different browsers are really changing daily. Every time you update, well, Firefox 4 is the HTML5 compatible version of Firefox, which is updated almost daily. And then you'll find that even Safari, like on the desktop, is going to be very different than Safari on the iPad, and Safari on Windows is going to be different than Safari on a Mac, as far as HTML5 compatibility. This is a great test to see. If you go to this URL on any browser, it will run through it will do basically a compatibility check, and it will say, Canvas can do these things, and Canvas can't do these things in Canvas. Video can do these things, can't do these things. And I did this check on a bunch of browsers, and I think the last time I checked, Firefox was beating Safari, but Safari's always been touted as the leader, but Firefox the new version of Firefox had it outdone by a mile. Okay. Pachyderm and HTML5 and the iPad. When I don't know, some of you probably know I've been involved in Pachyderm for a while, and when I first started playing with the iPad and realized kind of what the form factor was and what the display format was, I thought, oh, it would be great to have Pachyderm on the iPad, and might actually, give Pachyderm a breath of fresh air if people could easily publish for the iPad using Pachyderm. So we started to explore what that would take to do that. And so we actually do have funding for the project, and we have funding to develop 10 templates with HTML5 for Pachyderm. And right now we actually have prototypes done of exploration entry, commentary screen, the enlargement screen, and the slider screen. And we're currently evaluating the prototype, which I'll show you in a minute, and I can give you a URL and you can play with it yourself. And the goal is to make all the templates so they're backwards compatible. So it's not like you have to re-author something you've done before. You should be able to just basically convert it into an HTML5 compatible version. That being said, if you're using Pachyderm 2.1. And if you want to talk about 2.0, I can talk to you later about that. There's a significant technology change that takes place between Pachyderm 2.0 and 2.1, which would prohibit us from doing this. The next steps are we're going to really work on improving the UI and the accessibility options. If you haven't worked with Pachyderm 2.1, it's accessibility compliant, but it's accessibility compliant through Flash, which took a lot of extra work. Some of it's not necessary when working with HTML5, particularly on the iPad. We're working on improving speed and caching. The other templates, we're hoping, goal is by the end of the summer to have all 10 done, but we already have 4 done, and it only took us 3 weeks to do it. So we're moving pretty fast. And we'll keep you up to date. If you go to pachyforge.org, we'll keep you up to date on how that's going. So, will this demo work? No. Okay, I'm just gonna back out of here and just show it to you. Okay, this was not possible because this was all Flash before, but this is Pachyderm running in HTML5. This is 2.1 presentation. So this is the commentary template you're probably familiar with. We have the pop-up tombstone information, like you're familiar with. This is our bandwidth is a little slow in here. This is the enlarge template. You have the ability to scroll, and if the text actually, it works with gestures, so you can use your scroll with your fingers on the screen. If the text actually is long enough, there's because you want to indicate to people that you can scroll, there's a black bar that shows up on the side here that indicates that when you scroll, that black bar moves up and down. It's very subtle. We tried to make it so it wasn't really going to interfere. We didn't really want to have a big menu bar on the side of the text. Are any of you aware of how we developed a new training program for Pachyderm? Because this tracks with Pachyderm, is the product. I don't know how many of you are interested in Pachyderm anymore, but we developed a 15 video training program on how to build a Pachyderm presentation, and you build this program tracks with the Pachyderm. This is just a subsection of it. But it has you go through every single template and use every single technique, and it provides you with all the media and everything, and videos that you follow along so that you can build this. And so we just built a sample of this on here. Let's see what else we have. So this is the slider template, and right now this works by just touching the bar at the bottom, but we're going to make this so you're going to be able to slide with the gesture movement when we actually release it in the end. The videos, come on, performance here. We'll go to another place with this video. Well, there is video there. On a good network, you see video. And the videos are nice because you have, one of the things that we heard comments about in Pachyderm was the fact that you didn't have a scroll bar at the bottom of the screen. And time. And now you have the ability to touch the icon and fill the whole screen with the video, which people always, I'll try to demonstrate here. So you can now, all your videos can go full screen if you want them to go full screen. Okay, here's the advantages of Pachyderm in HTML5. It even plays on the iPhone. It scales. It's really small. does full screen video. You can select and copy text, which you couldn't do before because the text was embedded in Flash. You can bookmark pages. You can customize the sound effects, which you couldn't do before because they're all just MP3 files. It's easier to modify the template design because it's all CSS, it's all cascading style sheets now. So if you know how to modify cascading style sheets, you can change the text size, font, all that stuff just by going in and changing the text. And we're incorporating gestures. The challenges are the closed captioning that we incorporated in 2.1 we're going to have to do differently. We're going to have to embed it in the videos. The video files have to be replaced with identically named except ending in MP4. So you can't, because of the other version of Pachyderm uses Flash video, which isn't compatible, you have to replace your videos. Images can't be overlaid on top of the video very well. We're working on that problem. And don't have screen-to-screen transitions, although we think we're going to be able to solve that. One of the things that's frustrating right now, and this is the question I asked Jill from Apple yesterday, is you can't save your presentation on your iPad and carry it around with you because you can't save HTML pages on, like a whole presentation. That might change with what I was telling you about HTML5 if we develop a manifest list functionality, but that's something you can't do right now. This is how easy it is to convert a presentation. You take your folder of your presentation that you've output before from Pachyderm, and you just drop in one folder called library and two files. One's the index file, which is the new index file for, the starting file for the HTML5 version, and the icon. That's what shows up on the person's desktop or screen when they save it. And that's it. And you replace your movies with MP4 movies if you're using movies. It's easy to convert FLV movies to MP4s. Just convert them and keep them named the exact same thing, drop them in the folder, and that's it. And the really cool thing is then you can run on Flash or HTML. If you go to index 2, it goes to the Flash version. If you go to index 1, or if you go to just the index page, it goes to the HTML5 version. So you actually have both still. So I just want to point out our generous funders for this project. Like a lot of the recent Pachyderm development, this is all done by microfunding, which is basically me knocking on people's doors and saying, people want to do this, can you contribute a little bit of money? And these are listed in order by who our major funders are. Many thanks to MIDEA and NMC as being one of our big funders for this project, and California State University, the Walder's Art Museum, who's a big Pachyderm user, University of Minnesota, Oregon State, SF MoMA, who was the initial development of Pachyderm started there, and the Tang Museum, also at SF MoMA connection. That's it. Thanks, you guys. Lots of exciting stuff.